everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you. Thanks for coming. My name is Yoram. I'm the head of the teaching program at ELSC. And at this point, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the program that we prepared for today. And then I'll speak with you about the program later on. So here's the program. We have two scientific lectures given by faculty members of ELSC, Lilach Avitan and Jonathan Katmon. And after that, so these are two short scientific lectures. After that, I will discuss with you at length our teaching programs, because we have more than one option for graduate programs. And after that, you will have an opportunity to meet several, both faculty and students, graduate students from ELSC. To do that, we will move from this room to what we call our library. We will explain to you where it is, and we will also have refreshments and an opportunity to discuss informally with us. And finally, after that, the students who will come to meet you, they will also present themselves, and you will have options to visit several labs at ELSC depending on your preferences. So that's it for now. I will invite Lilach to start with the first scientific lecture, and I hope that you will have a very interesting day.
Sorry for the delay. My name is Lilach. Oh, I see so many familiar faces. It's really great to see you here. Great. Good. So I decided in order to give you like a small window into my world and the world of a neuroscientist, and I wanted to talk about the other intelligence. I know today there's a big buzz about the artificial intelligence, right? And we are in this era of machines talking to us and machines knowing what we know and what we prefer, and they can even suggest the blend of coffee that is best for us, right? But I wanted to talk today about what happens beyond artificial, and that's the intelligence of life. Okay, and I think that that's the basics to everything. Once we understand the intelligence of life, we have the keys to everything, including much fancier AI machines that we have at the moment. But in order for us to understand the intelligence of life, you will soon realize that it is a very, very difficult task. And this is where you come into the picture, because we really need a good cohort of people who can help us solve these questions. So I'll start with what we do in the lab, but also in ELSC, and why it is so important. So in a sense, basically, everything that we do involves our brains and our behavior, right? We are interacting with the world to elicit behavior, right? We don't do, our brain doesn't stand as a standalone. It basically drives behavior. And a lot of disorders have manifestations in behavior, right? So really what we need to do is to understand the link between brain and behavior. The problem is that the brain has a very secretive language, and this language we really don't understand. So what we do in order to understand this secretive language, we first listen to the brain. In many different ways, you will see what we do in the lab in order to listen to the brain. But we first listen, and once we listen to this brain and listen to this language, perhaps we can understand the code, right? Because it is a code. We have no idea what this code means, or we have little idea what this code means. But if we understand this code, if we can crack this code, then it's very easy to listen to a conversation that goes wrong and say, hey, you stop, you talk, you stop, I'm silencing you. And it's not that science fiction that today we have chips embedded or implanted in brains of patients that help them solve some really severe problems like Parkinson's and so on. Some of the developments that came in these neurochips come from this institute, from this very institute. So we can listen to the neurons. We can sometimes come with my plier and try to fix the conversation. We can create these chips that perhaps can intervene in the conversation as things go wrong. We can inspire. There's a new era or a new stream in neuroscience called neuromorphics, and that's designing chips designing chips that can compute things very lightly, as if very similarly to the way that the brain does it, because the brain is a super machine, yet it is very light in weight and very light in energy consumption, as opposed to the supercomputers you probably have seen or not, that these are like hangars of huge machines that require a lot of electricity and a lot of cooling power, right? So that's another thing that we can do. Another thing is that we can inform all of these algorithms of AI. So everything that we know about AI now comes from the very basic research that was done in neuroscience. All of the beauty of these LLMs and fancy machineries that we now use on a daily basis, they got their inspiration from the way that the brain works. The problem is that we don't really know how the brain works. And with the very little we know, we already managed to create these LLMs, right? And so the next generation is bring our understanding to the next level so that the machines will be even more powerful. And in a sense, what I'm trying to say is that we are looking for interpretability. We're trying to really understand the language of the brain. So when I said the interaction between brain and behavior, I actually wanted to say that there's a loop between us, our brain, and the environment. And the way that we interact with the environment is by behaving on the environment and observing what happened in the environment after we are behaving on it. And in this institute, we are looking at this question on different levels. One can look at it at the level of the neuron. One can look at it at the level of a small set of neurons. One can look at it at the level of the entire set of neurons in the brain of the animal. And others will look at it in a model, something very theoretical, perhaps even yet another animal model like the LLM, for instance. Okay, so it's very clear that in order to understand how the brain drives behavior in order to act upon the environment, we need to record from many, many neurons, right? Because these are the really fundamental units of the brain. So if we look at what happened in the history, over the history, how many neurons were we able to record simultaneously? Okay? This is actually a not so cheerful situation, because we are somewhere today, we are somewhere here. About 100,000 of neurons, perhaps 1 million of neurons. But if we look at the size of the brains of the different species, you can see that if we were to wait to record from every single neuron from a human being, it will take us, according to this slope, perhaps 200 years. Who is willing to wait? I'm not willing to wait. So we need to come up with a different solution, right? So how can we do that? What's the solution? The solution is to go to the very the highest point in the in this graph and say, okay, I want to stand here. I want to look at as many as possible neurons that we can, and I want to record from the brain. So what is the animal that allows us to do that? Currently, only the zebrafish. So the zebrafish, what do you mean zebrafish? How does it work? Okay, so I need you not to laugh because it's very serious now. Okay, so this is a zebrafish. It is 5 centimeters long. That's the adult. It looks very fancy. It has these zebra lines. But we are looking at them when they are babies. So when they are babies, they are lacking any pigment cells on the skin, so they are basically transparent. And because they are transparent, we can really look nicely at their head. We can see very big 2 eyes because they are very visual animals. And using some genetics that enables us to label all of the neurons in the brain of the fish, we can see all of the neurons in the brain of the fish without doing anything invasive. No invasive procedure, nothing, no operation, no surgery, nothing. And now I'm going to take you to a short stroll in the head of the fish, and we are going from the top down. And I won't expand too much on the regions here, but every small pearl here is a neuron. And it's not only that we can record or see these neurons, we can see when they are active. What does it mean? So here you see, I don't know if you can see it this way, but you can see that the neurons are flashing. Okay, so this is a recording from different planes in the brain of the fish. When the fish is engaged in some task, and soon we will find out what the task is, but basically this is the raw data of our studies. We get this disco party of a lot of lights turning on and off, and this is the code, this is what the neurons are saying. And now what we're trying to do is to decipher what does it mean, what does it say in terms of the fish. I'm sure that all of you now are asking in your head, oh well, but what can this brain with small head and small animal, and what can it do? How can it help us understand the human brain? Okay, so I want to tell you 2 things about the fish. The fish are actually, although they are considered, I don't know, looking for Nemo, and they don't know to count until 3, they don't remember, I don't know, I have a lot of sentences like this. I want to say that the fish are actually so intelligent that they can solve problems, engineerically solve problems that we, as human beings, still don't know how to solve. For instance, what do fish do for a living? What do they do for a living?
Hunt.
Hunt. They eat, right? How do they eat? What do they do when they open their mouths? But what?
Depends on the food they eat.
Sorry?
It depends on the food they eat.
It depends on the food, but basically what they are doing is they are looking at the prey. The prey is moving. The prey is yet another animal, right? So it doesn't have a ballistic trajectory or a predicted trajectory. The prey is yet another animal, another creature that has its own free will. And so the trajectory is not predicted, but the fish still is able to undershoot this target, right? So the fish basically is it is born, that's what it does for a living, to shoot targets that move in an unpredicted manner. This is something that if we had this by now, we would be very, very, very happy, especially these times. But and it's not so surprising that also the defense forces have joined forces with us, because they realize that fish are solving a problem that we, the engineers, don't know the solution yet, and the fish is already doing it with an off-the-box solution. Another thing that fish do, and we still don't know how to solve properly. So here you see a group of fish in a dish. They are relatively young. They don't care about each other. But after a few days, they become very socialized. You see that they are moving in a group. right? They are not scattered in the dish, separate, like each separately. They are running in a group. They found the benefits of the group. And this is actually even more interesting because you can see that although they are running in a group, they do not collide, right? So if we were to build like a hub of, I don't know, like an airport, which is a hub for many airplanes or things like that, an algorithm such that the fish are implementing would be an amazing idea. Another thing that they do, or how do they do that, actually, here I'm showing a very funny thing here. So here there's a dish with one fish, and that's another dish with another fish. And basically what we're doing is projecting to this fish the position of this fish as a dot, and for this fish we are projecting the position of this fish as a dot. And you can see that basically they are Skyping, or they are doing their Zoom, like we do Zoom. They are doing this Zoom, and in fact if you put the two fish together, it seems like they are actually swimming together. So the idea of me understanding that this other is someone like me that I want to follow is something that we as humans also do. Okay, how do I understand what is another one? What is another one like me? So in humans, for instance, if you give a toddler
Hey, Johnny.
to look at two images, one of a cartoon of a person, and the other one is a cartoon of a person that is inverted. And you can see that the red cross is the eye position of this human subject, and you can see that it definitely prefers the object that is more human, right? And sometimes it will go to the other side, but immediately return to what we prefer as human. But this does not happen in all subjects. For instance, this subject looks at the human shape and then moves backward and forward and backward, and you can see that this one cannot really understand or cannot really prefer. There is no preference. What I didn't mention is that this human subject is a typical toddler, and this one is a toddler with autism. Okay, so the idea of one understanding that the other is someone like me is already there in humans, and it goes all the way back to the fish. Can the fish do that? Can do this? Do we see this preference towards others in the fish? The answer is yes. If we show this U maze and have two windows to this U maze, in one side we have fish, and in the other window will be empty, and we will place a fish in this U maze, and we will ask the fish, what do you prefer? You will see that the fish will get next to the window and stand next to the window of the friends. Very, very much really likes to sit next to the friends. But this occurs only in 70% of the fish. Some fish will see the friends and will go the other way. Okay? So there you go. You don't need the entire human being to study things that you can study in fish, while you can really record the entire brain. Okay? So what do we do in the lab when we do that? Basically, the labs in ELSC and also in my lab is a melting point of people coming from very different disciplines. My discipline, my formal background is computer science and statistics, but there are people coming from physics, from maths, from biology, psychology, computer science, engineering, and so on. And basically what we do, we collect the data, we analyze it, and try to extract some general principle. What in the brain really is causing this and this behavior? To show you some idea of what we mean by mechanistic understanding, I want to tell you only the outcome of one study where we recorded the brain of the fish when they were interacting with others, and we identified a few neurons that we thought are really important for social behavior. Okay, so we recorded the fish before we actually treated those neurons. You can see this is where the social cue is, Now the fish decided here, but once it sees the social cue, it will constantly be next to this window. But then because of our mechanistic understanding, and we realize or we identified a group of neurons that are really responsive for this social behavior. So we took this fish and we very selectively silenced those particular neurons, only 20 neurons that were silenced, and then we recorded the fish right after this silencing. And you can see that this fish, although traveled through the social cue, decided to stop being so friendly. Okay, so that's what I mean when I talk about a mechanistic. Yes.
How do you choose which neurons to?
This is 6 years of work of a PhD student. Yeah, that's how we do it. And I want to end by saying that essentially I'm a pianist and I love playing the piano, and I think that the end goal of everything is to be able to really play the piano, because only when you really understand the logic behind the combination of notes and the combination of rhythms, you can really play something that you can, exploit the potential of the brain. And I agree, it's a great question, and these kind of things is really what we need you for. Every single question like this it's a huge box of lots of questions that requires very, very careful analysis in order to get to this particular set of neurons that are really responsible for that. Now, this can go even further, because now when we know that these particular neurons are responsible for social behavior, and we manage to reduce the social drive of the animal, we can ask the other way around. Can we take a non-social animal and shift it to the other side? That's even more impactful, or definitely on humans, for instance, people with social anxiety. Sorry,
you mean taking a different species of animal which is not social at all, or taking a fish which is not social?
Yeah, the way that we start is first of all solve it in the fish, and then come up with a solution that perhaps will be applicable to other, perhaps higher animals. Okay, so with that I'll conclude. I hope I gave you like a small window into the lab life, what we do. I'll stick around for questions if you want during your time at the library, so please feel free to approach and ask whatever. Yeah, thank you.
Can you see this dark well enough? Okay, hi everyone. Good to see so many people in here. Okay, so now in my short presentation, first I'm going to put my hands deep into the buzzwords of artificial intelligence, as Lilach put it, and basically tell you about work related to artificial intelligence and neuroscience here at ELSC. At the end of the talk, there's kind of three things that I hope you get for it. First, and I'll talk about it soon enough, is that the future of artificial intelligence and AI and machine learning and the future of neuroscience are tightly entangled together. You need to understand both of them in order to make the big progress, no matter in which field. The second one is that if you really want to make this big progress, this is where you want to be, at this cusp, at this intersection. Artificial intelligence and neuroscience, you can understand both of them, and ELSC would be one of the best places to do it. And the third one is, if you come here to ELSC, no matter in which area you're kind of hoping to work on, it's more theoretical, machine learning, or artificial intelligence, or it's more experimental, you will gain the methodologies, you will gain some experience with working with advanced AI tools across all the board, and you will be ready to take your next steps in the science of the future. Right? So these are like three things that I hope you get from this 15-minute talk. Now, before I start, let me just take a quick survey. Who here uses AI on a regular basis? Every day? Everyone. Okay. Now, who thinks is a good model for the brain?
Sorry?
Who thinks that this AI, this artificial intelligence that you're using, are a good model for the brain? To study brain, to study neuroscience? You're not sure. Okay, I will argue that it is, although they seem pretty far. But let me start with this kind of simple claim that AI affects every point of our life. You must know it by now, but it also affects pretty much every corner in science, in how we do science, in all fields. But specifically in neuroscience, AI is a specific, a very unique position, or neuroscience is uniquely positioned within this field, because AI is not only a tool we use, but it's very relevant to what we study. AI is also a model for the brain. And there are things we can understand by studying AI better to better understand the brain. And not only that, AI was originally built as some kind of idea of, or abstract idea of what the brain is or how the brain works. So understanding the brain better would push forward the idea of the brain. So this is basically the premise of what I'm trying to do. Okay, so we have those two systems, two very, very complex systems. One of them is a brain. This is a human brain, but as you've seen, even the brain of a small zebrafish and even the brain of a fly are pretty complex. On the other, and I would argue it's the most complex system that we have to study. We all know biology is complex. We have the biology of genetics, of the physics of interacting things, of cellular things, and protein networks, everything working together. But on top of that, we need to add computation. The things not only survive, they compute. They get information, they create information, and then they interact. There's communication. There's behavior. This is the most complicated system that we can study. On the other hand, we have those systems that we have built. We know how they work on the most microscopic level. They are on our computer. We are training them, we're teaching them, but we still don't know exactly how they work. So people are still trying to understand why they work so well or how to make them work so better. But the main question that I'm going to try and ask here today, or you should ask yourself, what is similar between them? And the answer is, of course, as in everything, is some things are similar, some are different. But there's a lot we can learn from the similarities, but there's also a lot we can learn from the differences between them. But only if we carefully try to understand both of them. So a little bit of history. What I'll do, I'll go through some ideas in neuroscience and AI and how they develop together and how they are working together, and I'll try to kind of pinpoint things that we are doing here at ELSC. So since the beginning, neuroscience and machine learning or an AI has been kind of entangled together. The first idea of machine learning, or in the way that we think today of machine learning, was basically just trying to model how a simple neuron works, but in a very mathematical symbol, but it was really imagined because we understood, or we thought we understood, that is how the brain works. So this was the most specific idea of a computational unit, as we understand neuron as a computational unit of the brain. But since then we've developed quite a lot. We went through visual systems, so we have neural networks that are actually built on how we understand the visual system, and most of image recognition, things that you see today, are based on that. We have networks or artificial networks or systems that can interact with the world, interact with the environment, play games, play chess, play Go, see how boating floats, drive cars, move robots, and they are based on ideas that we first developed in order to understand how organisms work, how our brain works, and how we behave. We have large language models, right? The thing that you kind of all of you and all of us use every day, and they are also based on our language, on how our brain works, on how our brain communicates. How similar is it, or how different is it? And we have an exciting new direction of brain-machine interface. What happens we kind of put those two things together. So along the history, I basically put all the things that are similar here, but along the history, people have thought, yeah, the brain is like the artificial intelligence is like the brain, or maybe it's not like the brain, and sometimes it's taking a turn getting further away from how the brain works, but then we realize actually maybe it's not that different than how the brain works. And it got back together, and this dance is keeping on, and I'll argue that it will keep going on, but it's only between understanding those two very complex network, or complex system, we can push it further. So what examples do we have on that, and for things that are being done all over the world and here at ELSC? So the simple case that some of you definitely know who came from computer science know, but all of you may have heard, is a network that are good at image recognition. Right? This was the first success of artificial neural networks. They were able to recognize objects and images as good as human. Well, those networks were constructed on how the brain works, on how the visual system works, on some principles that we noticed in the brain. And today we've gone much far beyond that. We can map between specific areas in those networks to specific areas in the brain and say, look, this neuron behaves like this neuron in the visual system. If I'm going to perturb or touch in this neuron, this is what happened to neuron here. Or if I present the vision, the visual system, some object, this is what I expect to see. So this huge advancement basically helps us not only push forward on our technology to make systems that can make object recognition, but also is now being used as a tool in order to probe our brain as we go. And these things are being done here at ELSC, for example, in the Weiss lab. They're still asking those kind of questions. There's still a lot of open questions. For example, why are those artificial networks so robust to adversarial examples? We can fool them quite easily in ways that we cannot fool the brain. In other ways, there are ways we can fool the brain, like optical illusions, that do not fool those systems. So there's still open questions to study there. So that's vision. That's one thing. The other thing is connecting those networks to behavior. How can we build naturally behaving network and can help us to understand the brain? So this is an example from studies that are being done in my lab together with Eran Lotem about behavior of mice. What we can do is take and think about an interesting task we can give to mice, have the mice learn them and perform them, understand the task, but also train networks at the same time that can do that. So this kind of pushes us to build better or different networks that better imitate the behavior of real animals. And by understanding them, maybe we can understand better why the animals are behaving the way they are. They're not perfect. Actually, most of the tasks are not doing as perfect as can be done. Why? Where can we do the networks that do better? How can we build networks that do better than that? And if we can build a network that do better, why are the mouse? Why has evolution done it better? There's a lot of open questions we can do that. So this is things going in my lab, and not in labs, and in Netken's lab is also kind of building for the brain. They call digital twins that they can study. Moving on to more interesting things, language models. Right? This is the thing now we have as a representation to the brain. But our language model is really a good representation of the brain. This is an open question. Right? They are built pretty differently. If you think about how they're built, so this is, those of you who may come from computer science know that this is kind of the internal working of a language model, a transformer model. This is very different than how we see how the brain learns, operates, and behaves. But still, there are similar things. There are things that are represented there by activity of neurons. Neurons are interacting with each other. There's dynamics. What can we learn from how the brain operates to how the networks? We can really ask those questions at a microscopic level, but we can go to higher levels still. Is the brain, are those networks, for example, holding a real model of the world? We know that we have some kind of internal model when we want to make decisions, when we're trying to navigate the world. Those networks have it. What does it mean to have a model of the world when we're looking at the activity of the neurons? Can we map between the two? Can we use this network in order to better understand the brain? Or if we understand better what's going on in the brain, the language processing, in our decision-making areas, can we make better artificial networks that are better at behaving, taking decisions? In this kind of questions, for example, so in my lab, we're working on artificial intelligence, this in Chaim's Polizzi lab, and I'm working on LLMs and a few more other labs in ELSC. More question, complexity. Which biological complexity is relevant for artificial intelligence? So I've shown you in the beginning, most of our artificial intelligence kind of based on this very simple function that get some number in, doing small computation, and then being spread out. But if you look at the single neuron in the brain, we have this very complex system. You don't even go, you can dive further in. It's not only the structure, there's biology inside going on. What details here matter? what are the details we need to take in order to really to understand the computation that's being done in the brain. Furthermore, what more details here can we take to the artificial network to improve them? These are open questions. ELSC lab, for example, is working on that. Efficiency. So Lilach talked a little bit about that, but you can imagine today, a lot of those AI companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, they are thinking of buying nuclear reactors because they need so much energy to train those networks. Not only to train, but to run them. But if you eat an apple, your brain will run for a few hours on that. But the efficiency of our brain is much more remarkably better than those artificial neural networks. What can we learn from that? It's not only about power efficiency. In order to train the artificial neural network to speak, for example, they had to read pretty much all the text in the internet. None of you read all the text of the internet when you tried to speak and to read and to write. So we're much more efficient also in terms of learning. And this comes from evolution, from how our brain is built. How can we use that to build better systems? Building efficient, I should say, this is related to things, for example, I'm building a lab on efficiency. Building different components using brainware. So in a collaboration, again, this is something in my lab, but we're not doing the experiments, we're doing the theory behind that. But imagine we can harness all this power of the brain and the efficiency and put it into our technology. And people today are raising small parts of brain, they're called brain organoids, a millimeter big, putting them on chips, putting sensor inside them so they can perturb and they can excite them and they can read the activity. And can we use the small brains, or many of those small brains, as computer chips? What can we gain from them? Do we get a more natural computing system? Do we get a more efficient computing system? There are a lot of questions we can ask, not only on the experimental side of how to build a system, but theoretical side questions of how can we do it better. And lastly, what happens when humans and other primates interact with AI? Right? You can feel that when you interact with AI, something different happens. This is a psychological question, but we can also take this thing to the brain. What happens to the neural representation in our brain as we're interacting with AI? What happens to the neural representation of the activities of this AI system as it talks to us? What happens when two AI systems talk together? What happens when we're taking an AI to help us communicate with other beings? For example, in the Homer's lab, they're using artificial intelligence to be able to communicate with primates, with monkeys, you know, and translate their voice to calls and for communicate with them. So you see that the artificial intelligence is a massive tool to understanding communication and collaboration and understanding between humans, but also as a tool for us to study those systems. Okay, so why coming? I hope you got the idea that those two realms are very, very well entangled, and I think that every progress would be in any of the fields would have any progress in neuroscience would directly impact artificial intelligence technology, and any advance of our technology would directly impact how we see the brain, how we study the brain, and how we understand it better. So why can't do that at ELSC? So ELSC founded in 1992 as ICC, maybe we'll hear about it a bit later, but it was the first place that took interdisciplinary science and thought we're looking at the brain. We don't just want biologists to look at it or people that are working with animals. We want physicists, mathematicians, and computer science and biologists working all together in order to understand the brain. So this idea of interdisciplinary science working together has been rooted into the DNA of ELSC since it was forming. It was one of the first, if not the first, but if not the first, one of the first places in the world who did this integration of people coming from STEM, from mathematics and computers, and working on the brain. And it still continue to innovate as we're now moving into the AI world. We have all the legacy in our center. We have a history of leading in computational neuroscience, right? So not necessarily in AI, but in computer science, in computational neuroscience, neural network, the theory of neural network, information theory, all of the things, a lot of it has been developed here at the Hebrew University and here at ELSC or with the ICLC. So you have a history of this coming at ELSC with prominent scientists like Chaim Sompolinsky, Tali Tishby, Eli Nelgi. Many of them are world prominent in understanding the computation and information processing in the brain. We have a truly interdisciplinary environment. So we are working together, both people from computer science, math, as I said, physics, biologists, all working together at the same lab, all taking classes together, some classes together, some perhaps more specialized. But you, no matter which field you're coming from, you'll get the benefits from the other field. You'll talk to the people on a daily basis coming from those other fields. We have a very computational curriculum. I'll talk about it soon, so you'll hear about it soon enough, but you'll learn much of the basic things that we need. Part of our training program is to learn, so you'll be able to communicate. If you're a biologist, you'll be able to talk with a computer scientist about advances in AI. And if you're coming from computer science, you'll be able to understand with a biologist about how the brain works and how it operates, and what does it mean to have the genes doing this and that, or the cellular biology, or the system neuroscience of the brain. And we have worldwide partnership, and we have many partnerships, but here are the specific things around AI and neuroscience. We have a long time partnership with UCL in London and Columbia University, and now we're starting also a close partnership with Harvard, specifically about doing AI together. So the last thing, let me run first just quickly on some of the labs in ELSC that are doing neuroscience. This is not all of them, this is not all the science being done in this lab, but you get a taste how no matter where you are, you'll be able to do AI, use AI and machine learning in your research. So starting from the labs that are more deeply integrated into understanding AI, the Segep lab learns the computational properties of a single neuron, the complexities, and how we can model a neuron using a neural network. The Lowenstein lab, understanding how social intelligence uses AI agents. Again, this is not all the lab is doing, I just took some highlights relative to neuro AI. In the Weiss lab, learn how a neuron machine, human machine vision. So Polinsky lab, theory of neural networks, memory and capacity of language model. My lab, learning and emergent computation and intelligence behavior in the system and how they relate to the brain. Other labs that are slightly more computational, not coming from AI, but using and adapting AI on a daily basis. Lilach's lab, as you just heard, revealing principles of biological intelligence to guide artificial neural network engineering. In the Burak lab, using AI to decode and interpret information in large-scale neural recordings. Nelken lab, use deep neural networks to construct digital twins to interpret behavior of complex behavioral tasks. Yeskovich lab developed novel AI-based method for medical brain imaging in order to plan and to execute surgery. In Didi Omer's lab, using machine learning and AI to decipher and mimic social interaction in non-human primates. So you see, this idea of AI lab is really rooted in every lab in ELSC. So why is it happening? How are we making this happen? We have a good infrastructure to promote AI in ELSC. We have computational resources, so we have a very, very strong computer class here. I think it's actually in many terms stronger than the main one in the university. One of the stronger reasons we're keeping developing. So if you are trying to use AI to model the brain, we have the computational power here in-house, not to mention our collaboration with the international universities that also have a massive computational power to use. We have advanced tool development. We have someone specifically in ELSC in charge of developing new tools and to working with the researchers, with the student, to develop specifically tailored tools for your research. If you want to use some kind of an AI agent to do this, or write a script to connect some artificial intelligence to your system, is it your physical system or to the way that you do analysis, we have someone you can go and speak to, and we'll sit with you and will help you integrate that within your research. Part of it is also giving training, guidance, and support. So we're having workshops sometime. Our courses has to be done, of course, teaching those abilities. And of course, we have the core courses. So some of the core courses that you will learn are very, very computational. You will learn to program them. You'll know how neural networks are learning. You'll understand what learning in neural networks has to do with the brain. So part of the curriculum itself. Okay, I know I went fast on the thing. Let me just summarize. The idea here is that building better AI and understanding the brain are integrated together. There are two things that cannot be taken apart. And in order to make the really next big leaps, not the small incremental leaps that a little bit of AI or understanding more a little about the brain, we need to combine the power of two. And the best way to do this are those places that combine and really integrates a real interdisciplinary approach of bringing people from computer science, machine learning, physics, biology, all working together with a shared goal of understanding how this complex machine thinks and learns and organizes to make computation and behavior together. So I'll be here as well afterwards in the library if you have any questions, and that's it. Hope to see you all.
Okay, while I connect my computer, I'd like to thank Lilach and Jonathan, and again, they will be available for questions later. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to mention two key contacts if you have questions later, meaning not just today but afterwards. So my name is Yoram. I'm in charge of teaching programs at ELSC. We have both undergraduate and graduate teaching programs. Today we're only talking about graduate level programs. And Nili, who is here as well, sitting at the back, is administratively in charge of all our teaching, and she is your main contact person for any administrative questions and advice related to both registering for our program and questions about the program. I'll say a few words about myself. In my training, I'm a physicist. I did a PhD in theoretical physics, unrelated to biology or to the brain, and only later I shifted maybe it's somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago into research in neuroscience, once I saw the light and realized that it's so interesting. And my research has to do with the way the brain it's theoretical research, having to do with how the brain or neural networks in the brain perform various computations, and how the brain represents information. Now, you got a glimpse from the talks of Jonathan and Lilach about certain aspects of what's going on at ELSC, but we're a fairly big center. We have at ELSC 36 research groups, and one of the things I want you to note is I tried to, in one word or two words, describe the discipline from which each researcher is coming from. You see that this is very diverse, and this is because neuroscience is in nature a very interdisciplinary brain area, and that's the ideology of our center, that you need to bring people from different disciplines together in order to understand the brain. And each one of these researchers has a certain place within neuroscience. Neuroscience is a huge field, and I tried again in just a word or two words describe the kind of place of each researcher in neuroscience: cognitive neuroscience, neurobiology, systems neuroscience, theoretical neuroscience, molecular neuroscience, medicine and translational neuroscience, and so on. So it's very diverse. And likewise, if you look at the research, at the students and postdocs at the center, we have around 200 research students and postdocs coming from very diverse backgrounds. Probably the most common ones are computer science, life sciences, cognition, psychology, physics, but you see here we have people here who did an undergraduate in chemistry. I don't know if we have right now someone who did the undergraduate studies in linguistics, but we did have such students here in the past. Now, so the main things I want to tell you is about our center. I already started to do that, and about our program. But before that, I think it's very important to discuss why is this an exciting time in neuroscience, because I imagine that many of you maybe are exposed to neuroscience, some of you are not, and coming from an undergraduate in another field, you want to decide whether that's a field that you want to go into in terms of research. And I list a few reasons why I think this is really one of the most exciting frontiers of scientific research right now. One of them is the cross-fertilization between theory and experiment in neuroscience. Now, neuroscience has a long history of connection between theory and experiments. In this picture, what I'm showing you is a picture from the Lundbeck Prize, which is considered the highest prize in neuroscience, the Nobel Prize of neuroscience. There is no Nobel Prize in neuroscience, there is in life sciences or physiology, medicine, but specifically in neuroscience, this is the highest prize that is given, and it was given a bit more than a year ago to 3 researchers. One of them is Chaim Sopolinsky, one of the founders of this center, who is here. And by the way, all of these people are physicists except for Fredrik X, who is the king of Denmark, who gives the prize. And the prize was given for the very important contribution of theory to understanding, I'll read to understanding the principles that govern the brain structure, dynamics, and emergence of cognition and behavior. So note that in this citation of what these people did, there is no math, but it all has to do with the use of theoretical tools in order to understand the brain, and we understand that in order to understand how the brain reaches cognition, we need to use computational tools. Now, Chaim, together with various other pioneers at the Hebrew University coming from life sciences and medicine and cognition and computer science, founded this center, as Jonathan mentioned, more than almost 35 years ago. In a previous incarnation, it was called ICNC, today it's called ELSC, under the understanding that you need to bring up together all these disciplines, and under the ideology that we need to create a teaching program that will give students tools and language and understanding of all these fields. And this program is entering now its 34th or 35th year. And in terms of the cross-fertilization between theory and experiments, as I mentioned, there's a long history, but there's also very exciting things that are happening right now that make this connection even much more strong than it was before. And we'll touch on that in the next points. Now, just in terms of the researchers, as I mentioned, we have researchers coming from all these disciplines at our center. So one of the second point that I wanted to mention is the AI revolution that is happening just in front of our eyes. And as Jonathan mentioned, it's a revolution in all fields of science and in many aspects of our lives, but in neuroscience it has a very special role because the success of artificial systems in solving complex cognitive tasks gives us a new tool or a new way to raise hypotheses of how cognition works. And we can try to use what we learn from artificial systems in order to interpret what the brain is doing. Okay, I won't say more about that because you heard the whole lecture about it. Another point that I'd like to raise is the cross-fertilization between basic research and translational research. Translational meaning useful in technology or in medicine. We are, in a deep way, a basic research center. Nevertheless, about half of the labs at ELSC have certain aspects of the research which is connected to translational clinical impact, and the places where this enters, I just listed 3 key ones is brain-machine interfaces, which are important for neural processes and also for communicating information into the brain. Deep brain stimulation, which is an important tool for treating neurological diseases, and one of the pioneers of deep brain stimulations, Professor Hagai Bergman, is one of the founders of ELSC. And the understanding of the molecular and genetic underpinnings of neurological and psychiatric diseases. And then I think perhaps, in my view, the most exciting reason why neuroscience is now a very important frontier is that this field has undergone a series of revolutions in the past 10, 15 years in terms of the technological tools that are available for neuroscientists in order to probe what is going on in the brain. It's what my experimental colleagues in this building can do right now when looking at the brain is incomparable to what was possible 15 years ago when I moved into the field. And I listed here some of the ways in which this is happening. One is the ability to simultaneously monitor the activity of thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of neurons at the single neuron level, see what each neuron is doing at the same time. And Lilach showed you an example. I'll go back to that in a moment. All this can be done using wireless recording techniques in freely or other techniques in freely behaving animals, not just animals that are sitting and doing nothing. These are animals that are performing cognitive tasks. We have, or my experimental colleagues, the experimentalists have tools, very, very sophisticated tools to selectively silence or activate neurons in the brain at will. This is called optogenetics. All this is enabled by genetic tools. And there's another line of research which is very important, very new and important, which is called connectomics, which is, I won't have time to talk much about it, but it's a way to take a piece of the brain and map the anatomy at the level of single neurons and synapses, connections between neurons, and understand for all the, say, several, 100,000 neurons in a certain area, how each one is connected to another. And that gives us unprecedented understanding of the structure of neural networks in the biological brain. So you've seen the talk of Lilach, where she showed that in her lab they can measure the activity of, say, around 40, 50,000 neurons, a large fraction of the neurons in the nervous system of this zebrafish. And this is done using a technique called calcium imaging. I thought that I mentioned one more technique, which is kind of a new frontier, one of the exciting developments in neuroscience right now in the making, which is called voltage-sensitive dyes. So neurons, some of you know, some of you don't know, they communicate with each other by spiking. They generate spikes, which are electrical signals that travel along the axon of the neuron and meet the dendrite of another neuron. That's how neurons communicate with each other. But the internal dynamics of a neuron, which is also mostly electrical, has to do with what is called the membrane potential. It's the potential between the outside and the inside of the cell, and that varies as a neuron is performing a computation. And it's extremely informative to have access to the internal dynamics of the neuron, the membrane potential. Since the 80s, there has been tools to do that using electrophysiology, inserting an electrode into the brain, picking up one neuron and doing it, extremely, extremely hard experiments. But now the optical tools which are being developed using voltage-sensitive dyes, which are proteins that sit on the membrane of the cell, and the fluorescence depends on the membrane potential. And this allows, again, this is a technique which is in the making, but allows measurement of the membrane potential of many cells at the same time, unprecedented access not just to the spiking, but to the internal dynamics of many cells in the brain. Yoav Adam, who made major contributions to the developments of these techniques when he was a postdoctoral researcher at Harvard, and he's now in our center, and he's using this technique in the brains of rodents. And I don't know how much you'll be able to see here, but there's a mouse here running in some virtual environment, and while the mouse is running in this virtual environment, his lab measures the activity of cells in the brain involved in the hippocampus, cells that are involved in representing and where the animal is in space, and making computations involved in navigation. And the lab of Yoav Adam is one of the labs that you can visit during the lab visits later today. So going back to this example, you've seen the zebrafish, you've seen the mouse. Researchers at ELSC work on various model organisms: humans, primates, mice, rats, zebrafish, primates, in order to understand the brain using diverse techniques. And one of the things that should be clear is that if we just make this measurement, of course there's a huge amount of work that goes into just collecting these measurements, but now we have the activity of 50,000 cells over a long time. What do we do with that? Okay, we need to find ways to interpret this data, and that requires computational tools, both computational theories that allow us to make some sense out of what is going on, and also computational tools to just find some statistical structure in the activity that we measure. And this is, again, an example for the point that I made, that in order to understand the brain, we need to basically these 3 points. We need interdisciplinarity, we need theoretical frameworks, and we need a crosstalk between theory and experiment. And this is the spirit of our teaching program. So now I'm going to switch into talking more in more detail on a more practical level about graduate studies in our center. So we have 3 different programs. Most of you are probably interested in the first one, which I will spend most of the time talking about. This is our flagship direct track PhD program for excellent graduates of either of undergraduate or MSc graduates. And I'll talk about the 2 other programs later. And I urge you or recommend to you to go into our website to learn more about this program and also about the research in specific labs. One thing that you'll note in this slide is that we don't have formally an MSc program per se, but I will talk about that later. There are ways to do a master's degree at ELSC. I'll get into that again later. So the direct track program. Here are some of the key points. First of all, it is a direct study program for a PhD. So the idea is that you directly after finishing an undergraduate program in diverse fields, but we're looking for excellence, you can join the program. You start by taking lots of courses, getting acquainted with labs at ELSC, and then the normal progression is that you continue towards a PhD without doing a master's degree. The program in its ideology is designed to give you a broad view of the ingredients of knowledge that you need in order to develop as scientists in neuroscience, depending also on your background. So if you come from physics or math, you need to understand the biology. If you come from biology, you need to understand some computational tools. And the idea is to give you this broad view, but also deep understanding of these topics in several fields. In these several fields, you have the opportunity here to do both your studies and your research at a very strong academically leading research institute, which is very well known internationally. Our program is also international. All the teaching is in English, and we have many students who are not Hebrew speaking. And as I will elaborate a bit later, our program is very special in the sense that it gives you a very strong support, both financial, both academic, and you're part of a tight-knit community. So our target candidates are excellent undergraduate people who finished undergraduate degree from diverse disciplines, as written here, interested in joining the quest to understand the brain. And our program also accepts people who finished a master's degree. There are other options for those, but you can join this program and take the whole study course of the program. Let me tell you a little bit about the structure of the program. So in the first 2 years of the program, you are really formally, or in terms of how you registered in the university, you're a master's student. You take courses in the first year, and the courses are in the different areas that we think you need to learn, get knowledge in all these fields. The first year is the core courses. We have 2 courses in physiology, together 5 points altogether in the first semester. Human cognitive neuroscience. We have 2 courses main courses in theory. This one, which is 4 points, and another one in the second semester. We also, in the first semester, we have a course where you go in small groups each week into a different lab in order to get some understanding of these labs, both in order to broaden your view of neuroscience and in order to start thinking about what is the lab that you would want to join for a PhD. And then in the second semester, I already mentioned the neural learning course. There's also a data analysis course. There's you need to take either a physiology lab course, which is a lab course, or a human neuroscience methods course, where you learn techniques that are mostly non-invasive techniques, experimental techniques that are used with humans. You can also take both if you want, but we don't require it. in the program. And you are required in the second semester to also do a research project in one of the labs. And then in the second year, alongside your studies, you're supposed to start working in a lab, and most people after the third, and it can be the same lab where you did this lab rotation, or it can be another lab, you can kind of switch, but you must be in a lab. And for most people, this lab is the one that they will stay in for their PhD, but it's possible also to change a course, and sometimes people do that. And in addition to being in a lab, you have additional courses. At the second year, students in our program now choose a specialization, either theory or physiology or cognition, and that implies that 6 points of courses they must take in the advanced courses in these topics. And at the end of this year, students present research that they've done during that year and write a short proposal for their PhD and start the PhD phase of their studies. Okay? And now come the next years of the studies, years 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7, where people do their PhD research, and it's research and more research and more research, and that should be the center of your academic life during those years. You also are required to take additional 12 points. This is a general requirement for a PhD in the Hebrew University. All right, so it's a fairly heavy program in terms of courses, but you gain from it a very strong education. These are just some examples of names of courses, the advanced courses, but just to give you an idea. One other thing I want to mention is that since people come to our program from different backgrounds, many need to complement their knowledge at the undergraduate level. So some people don't know linear algebra or don't know calculus, and in that case you would need to complement your knowledge. And the way we do this is that we offer preparatory courses. These are self-study courses. We highly recommend to do them in the summer before, if you're accepted to a program, to do it even before you start it, but you can also do it during the first semester of the first year. And these self-study courses are offered in math. We have 2 courses, one in linear algebra, one in calculus, probability, and statistics. There's one in cognition and one in physiology that covers basic molecular biology and basic physiology of neurons. And again, this is determined based on your prior knowledge. You need to pass an exam in these courses. Now, one other very important question is where are you going to do your PhD? So in our direct track program, you can do, there are many, many options. So you can do your PhD, first of all, at any lab at ELSC, okay? But our program allows you to do also your PhD studies in any other lab at the Hebrew University on a topic that has to do with neurons or with cognition or with the brain, okay? Even artificial neural systems, if there's a connection, conceptual connection to study of the brain, that's fine. Okay, so there's actually order of 130, 140 labs that you can join at the Hebrew University. In addition to ELSC, in the Silverman Institute, Life Sciences, Cognitive Sciences, Computer Science, Rakach Institute, Faculty of Medicine, and so on. Another point that I want to make about our program is that it's a program that is very well funded and it gives very generous scholarship to students. Our goal is that you will be immersed academically in studies and research, and that's what you should be doing while you're a student at ELSC. And so this just gives the numbers, just gives you an idea. We in the first 2 years, we fully pay the tuition, and you get a scholarship of 7,100 shekels, which is more or less almost the maximum that can be given for master's students at the Hebrew University. And then in the following years, we still provide support for 3 more years. The program provides partial support. The lab that you're in fills it in, and in terms of what you can get, it's up to 10,000 shekels per month. And some students in our program also work as teaching assistants, and then they receive an additional salary. And one other point that I want to make is about 20% of our students receive highly competitive and prestigious scholarships, such as the Azrieli Scholarship, Adams Fellow Scholarship, CLO, and so on. So this is what I wanted to tell you about the direct track program, but we have two other programs that I want to mention to you. Oh, sorry. No, I didn't finish yet talking about the direct track program. I want to tell you a bit about our graduates. So here's a pie chart, probably updated maybe 2 or 3 years ago, so the numbers are not completely precise in the pie chart. We have 200 students, that's actually updated today, students that graduated. In our program right now, we have 112 active students along with the whole set of years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. 45% are women. And the pie chart shows you what the graduates are now doing. And here's a bit more detail. So I think one of the really remarkable facts here is that 30%, more than 50% of our graduates are in the academic system. Of them, 30% are faculty members in other research universities. 24% are currently in postdoctoral research in various universities. And then 31% are in the high-tech industry. Our graduates in faculty positions are filling the ranks of neuroscience and other departments in all the universities in Israel. You can see here the numbers. And also we have graduates in some of the top, many of the top universities in the world. And I've listed a few here, and I'll just give you some names of people who are graduates of our program outside ELSC. We also have graduates of our program who became faculty at ELSC. And what I wanted to point out is that, again, all these people are graduates of our program, and if you look at the research, you can really see the fingerprint of the ELSC education and how they approach science. Okay, so now I will switch to another program. I finished with a direct track program. This is just a conventional PhD track. So I wonder, is there anyone here who is already with a master's degree? Okay, so that's what I expected, a few. So if you're with a master's degree already, you have the option to join the direct track program, but then you'll take another 2 years of intense studies. Maybe you don't want to do that. And in that case, you can just join a lab at ELSC to do a PhD. So the PhD track is a conventional PhD program. The way it works is you don't sign up just for the program. You contact a lab that you want to join at ELSC, and if both you and the lab head want to go ahead with this, you can join the PhD. The scholarship in this program is completely funded by the lab, so you need to discuss with your advisor what the scholarship is going to be, but ELSC labs typically give very generous funding. It's an international program like the direct track program. Even though it's not a direct track program, it's fully integrated in the ELSC community, in a retreat and so on, in activities that we have. And target candidates are masters. Oh, this should have been MSc MA graduates, not MSc and BA graduates. Over here. MSc and MA graduates from diverse disciplines looking to pursue a PhD at an ELSC lab. And then finally, I want to, for master's degree graduates, there's one more program that I want to mention, either for those who are here, or we have also many people who are joining online. It's what we call the transition year track. It's a very special program that started fairly recently. And the idea is that if you did a master's degree, which doesn't have to do much with neuroscience, okay? You don't know much about the brain. You did a master's in computer science or in physics or in biology not related to the brain, but you were interested in brain science, you know that that's what you want to work on in a PhD. Maybe you need some time in order to select a lab that you will work in. Maybe it's too early for you to contact someone, a PI, and start your PhD. And so what this program gives to, we're looking for for exceptional students, and what we're aiming to give those students is a year in which you can learn about the brain, you can take courses at ELSC, you also get acquainted with ELSC labs and look for a PhD advisor. And during that year you get a full scholarship, and then you start a conventional PhD.
Sorry?
Yes.
It's only for MSc, not
Yes,
MA
yeah,
students?
all MSc and, well, it could be also MA students. Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to say about our teaching programs is that we don't formally have an MSc, a master's program, but maybe some of you find it a bit, you're not sure that you want to commit to a PhD. Okay, it's a long commitment. So what I want to tell you is that you're not committing to a PhD if you join our program. If you're joining the direct track program, you're not really committing. We have the option in our program to decide that you want to exit take the courses, do a master's thesis, submit a thesis. We can give a MSc in brain science, okay? And most of the students in our program do continue to the PhD, but you have that option, okay? So that's very important to know. And in that case, even if you decide about this after 1 year, then we even reduce to some extent the coursework that we require from you. And you can, in principle, finish in 2 years. Another point that I want to make is that there are many options to join labs at ELSC for a master's degree. If you're not sure if it's too much for you to go into a direct track PhD program, there are many labs at ELSC that can be joined through other master's programs at the Hebrew University. The most important ones are the Life Sciences Brain and Behavior program. And if you're interested in that, you should talk with Mickey London, who is at ELSC, but he's the head of that program. The Cognition program. And physics and computer science is more limited. There are some of the labs at ELSC, like my lab, for example. I'm also part of physics, so you can do an MSc in my lab in physics. And other labs you can do in computer science. The life science and cognition programs are quite permissive in terms of advisors. So many of the labs at ELSC, you can do an MSc through those programs. All right. One other thing that I wanted to mention to you is just because I suppose this is an audience of people who are interested in the brain, and some of you might want to get a better perspective on what is neuroscience. So I want to mention this very special course that we will offer in the second semester. It's called Brain Mysteries, a Research Journey. It's formally a course, it's an undergraduate course, okay? And the academic coordinator is Professor Elon Vaadia, one of the pioneers of ELSC. And what happens is in this course is that every week there's a meeting with two neuroscientists or two neuroscientists discussing with a dialogue between them and with the students on a different topic. And here are just some of the lists, some of the topics that will be discussed. You should just glance through it. If you're interested, I recommend to you to look this up, and you're very welcome to either join the course formally or come to the lectures informally. And the last thing, the last topic on my agenda is just to summarize why ELSC is a very strong place, option for you to join if you want to do PhD level research or master's level research in neuroscience. So I want to point out several things. One is that ELSC is a very unique research institute at the Hebrew University. We are independent of all the other faculties. We are hierarchically at the university, we are like our own faculty. We are we're an internationally leading center with numerous collaborations with other leading neuroscience centers worldwide. Jonathan Kadmon mentioned that. We have a very long and very fruitful history of excellence, academic excellence, and academic leadership in neuroscience, especially in the interdisciplinary aspects of it, combining tools from the exact sciences, life sciences, and cognitive sciences. And one other thing is that there's a long history. We have people who really contributed major contributions to the field, but we're also in some sense a very young center, because the way ELSC evolved is that in its current form is through a very generous funding from the Safra Foundation 15 years ago. And since that time, ELSC recruited a very large number of really excellent, superb young researchers coming from the best after postdocs at Harvard, MIT, Columbia, and various leading universities in the world. And so we're, again, both with some very pioneers that contributed a lot to the field, and young researchers who are really at the cutting edge of what's being done in neuroscience. We're a very well-funded center, both from the Safra Foundation, and I'll talk about grant money in a moment. And that means that we have top-notch research facilities. We have, you see here these facilities represented in this slide: a fabrication lab, a virus code facility, which is essential to what is done in genetic tools in many of the physiology labs, a microscopy center. We have our own fMRI machine, and we have a high-performance computing facility, which is comparable to together with computer science. These are the largest HPC facilities at the Hebrew University by a large margin. In some ways, we suppress computer science in terms of the computing power that we have at our center in the basement of this building. And we are, in terms of grant funding, the grant funding per investigator at ELSC is the highest in the Hebrew University, which means both that ELSC labs are well funded, and also this attests to the quality and impact of research at ELSC. We create a very strong academic community, and this has to do with the structure of our program, but also in all the events and activities that we organize. You are part of a group, if a special group when you join ELSC. In addition, of course, to weekly seminars, we have international conferences that we hold here. We provide generous travel grants to students. Students go to the ISFN meeting in Eilat, funded by our center, and we also provide funding for conferences abroad. We have a very important annual retreat every year, which is a 3-day event in some beautiful place in Israel, and where students present the research, and we have additional social activities and so on. So I'm almost at the end. There's one more slide that I have, I think, which is just to tell you what we are looking for in terms of candidates. We are looking for academic excellence. 3 points: academic excellence, high motivation, and specifically interest in the brain and research, again, on the brain and cognition. And 3, an interest in interdisciplinary research that combines tools from different fields. You don't need in your research to combine tools from all the fields mentioned here, but we really look for people who are interested and excited about the opportunity to combine ideas from more than one field of science, because that's the essence of what's required to succeed in neuroscience. And that finishes my presentation. I wonder, should we take the questions in the library, or some questions here as well?
I think so. There is
Maybe 2-3 questions here. Okay, and then we'll move to the library.
Students are also waiting for us
Hmm?
there, so-
Yeah. So, but maybe just directly related to things that I discussed. Yes.
You didn't mention the acceptance process. Is that something you want to later?
I did not, so this is a good point. Thanks for raising it, and maybe I should have. You can find information about this on our website. What we ask you when you apply is there's a list of things that we ask for. Of course, your CV and the grade transcripts, but also we ask for recommendation letters and from a statement from you telling us why you want to join our program. And then in our program, we have an initial stage of screening which is just based on the documents that you submit. And then for those who pass that initial stage of screening, there's an interview, which is about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I don't remember exactly. Okay? And after that, we give you an answer whether you were accepted.
Do you have a timeline for this?
Yes, but I think because I don't remember it for sure. So what is the deadline for submission? Maybe? Do you remember?
March
March 15th.
5th.
5th? What?
5th.
5th. Oh, sorry. Okay. March 5th is the deadline for submission. I'm not sure if the international students who are joining us online, maybe their deadline is different.
Same
no?
deadline.
Same? Okay. So for everyone, March 5 is the deadline. Any other questions? By the way, that's for the direct track program and for the transition year program. If you want to join a PhD after a master's, that can be done under any time of the year.
What about postdoc?
So we have many opportunities for doing postdoctoral research at ELSC, and you can just look at we have something about that on our website, but you're very much encouraged also to contact specific labs and ask if they're interested, if that's possible.